What is your message?
Respect African societies and their values.
Wow, the Africa I want.
An Africa that is able to create jobs for its young people.
I want an Africa that is self-sufficient.
Africa is more united than before, united against exploitation, intimidation, and most importantly, Africa is united against poverty.
Africa has been arbitrarily and prejudicially profiled as risky for investment on entirely spurious grounds.
Africa wants to determine their own destiny. Africans want to negotiate as partners, not beggars.
We do not want anything for free. You will pay more eventually because you have a bigger economy. We will pay commensurate to our economy.
African economies now want to dictate pace at the global stage.
We want another organization of equals, where you have as much say because you pay, as much as we do because we also pay.
Hail Africa, hail beautiful. The sleeping lions in the jungles are now awake with a daring approach to face giants in the cities.
And we want those resources controlled not by IMF and World Bank. Because IMF and World Bank, you have the final say. We don't have no say.
The most painful thing about poverty in Africa is not the poverty itself, but poverty in a place that holds 40% of the world's gold and up to 90% of the global chromium and platinum. Africa has the largest reserves of cobalt, diamond, platinum, and uranium. Sadly though, around 460 million people in Africa live in extreme poverty according to Statista.com. But someone somewhere is taking advantage of this poverty. The rich and powerful foreign nations whose prosperity wouldn't be without the natural resources from Africa. The worst part of all this are the politicians and few other individuals who choose to be corrupt as Africans pay with their lives. The corrupt systems built by colonialists 500 years ago and individuals who continue to facilitate these systems to exploit Africa, the beautiful land, at the expense of the lives of the natives. Former French President Jacques Chirac had this to say: "Without Africa, France will slide down into the rank of a third power." This had earlier been prophesied by Chirac's predecessor, François Mitterrand, in 1957, when he said, "Without Africa, France will have no history in the 21st century." But everything is taking a whole new twist. There is every reason for Western powers to be concerned. The continent is not just transforming, but transforming fast. A new breed of leaders, growing skilled population, and increasing awareness is pushing the continent to a whole new heights. Colonial barriers of more than 2 centuries ago are now on a knife edge. This is the story of how Africa is taking on the world.
Desde el África hasta Nueva York, se oye mi voz, se oye la rumba, se oye el tambor.
Formation of the African Union. The African Union, or the AU, is more than just an organization for unity. This is a union for a full regional integration that aims at establishing Africa as a peaceful, united, sovereign, and economically sound continent. The whole idea of the AU originated from a meeting in Sirte, Libya, chaired by the late Colonel Muammar el-Gaddafi. In 2002, 55 member states agreed to replace the colonial-inspired Organization of African Unity, or OAU, which was formed on shallow objectives. Due to their divide and rule approach, colonialists divided Africans along ethnic and tribal lines, and the OAU was formed to unite Africans after years of colonial turmoil. The OAU was less effective in solving core problems of the continent, which included peace, poverty, and economic dependence. Within just 2 decades, the AU has already formulated a number of high-profile projects, which include the formation of a continental army, or a continental passport, the African Continent Free Trade Area, or the AfCFTA, among others. All the next parts in this video are based on the AU's Agenda 2063. The most important highlight of all this, however, is a project that aims at ending all wars, civil conflicts, gender-based violence, violent conflicts, and preventing possible genocides in future. These have always been a cause for all poverty in Africa, rooted deep in the divisions created by colonialists. Once fixed, Africa will be a safe place and governments will save money to cater for the needs of the people.
As African leaders, one firm, clear voice, prevent the plunder of our continent's resources by others. This single mechanism has inaugurated the world's largest free trade area. Under it, 54 countries.
The Africa Continental Free Trade Area, or
AFCFTA.
This is part of the Agenda 2063 as discussed earlier. The African Union intends to accelerate the implementation of initiatives for continental growth and sustainable development. When fully implemented, the AFCFTA will be the largest free trade area in the world, connecting 1.3 billion people across 55 countries with a combined GDP of $3.4 trillion. The agreement will cut tariffs in cross-border trade and reduce customs procedures to drive economic gains. It is expected to lift around 30 million Africans out of extreme poverty, create employment opportunities, and accelerate industrialization as well as increased exports. Africa desperately needs this, and we hope really and strongly believe that the AFCFTA will do a step forward.
And we are not against the US dollar. We just want to trade much more freely.
The Pan-African Payment and Settlement System, or the PAPS. This is a groundbreaking platform aimed at facilitating cross-border transactions within the continent and is expected to save businesses and traders in Africa more than $5 billion annually in transaction costs alone. PAPS will make payments between African countries much cheaper and faster, save foreign exchange reserves, and shield the African countries from over-reliance on foreign technologies, which are costly and at times have been used as weapons by Western powers. The system was developed by Afrexim Bank together with the AFCFTA. Still in pilot phase, the initiative is already seeking to go beyond the 9 countries currently in participation. As noted by African Business Publication, this is no small feat on a continent with 42 different currencies, few of which have value outside their borders. Take an example of Ghana, who cannot accept the Naira from the nearby Nigeria for their cedi, nor the Rand from South Africa, but must rely on the US dollars and other international currencies in trade and investment. All banks in Africa are required to have corresponding international banks abroad so as to complete cross-border transactions within African states. For example, a transaction between close African neighbors like Uganda and Kenya, or Senegal and Mali, must travel to, say, New York, so it can be passed, costing the continent billions of dollars in transaction costs and lost forex revenues.
Traders from Djibouti selling to Kenya, or traders from Kenya selling to Djibouti, have to look for US dollars. How is US dollars part of the trade between Djibouti and Kenya? The barriers to easy payments and settlements across borders within our continent are simply unsustainable.
Program Infrastructure Development for Africa, or PIDA. The program covers areas of transport, energy, transboundary water and telecommunications, and is dedicated to facilitate continental integration through improved regional infrastructure as per AU Abuja Treaty of 1991. PIDA is a joint initiative of the African Union Commission, AUC, the new Partnership for Africa's Development Planning and Coordination Agency (NPCA) and the African Development Bank (AFDB). On full implementation by 2040, the program is expected to reap savings of $30 billion annually, or $850 billion through 2040. Power access is expected to rise from 39% in 2009 to nearly 70% in 2040, providing access to an additional 800 million people. This move is aimed at overcoming political boundaries between African countries which hinge towards colonial past, designed to facilitate motives of colonialists rather than realize Africa's growth and economic development. On a deep analysis, you will find that many African countries have a population of less than 20 million people, with economies of less than $10 billion. Old roads, ports, and railroads were built for resource extraction and political control, rather than to bind territories together economically and/or socially. Silencing the guns. Africa is working towards ending all wars, civil conflicts, gender-based violence, violent conflicts, and preventing possible genocides. Wars and conflicts, majority of which are funded by foreigners, have hampered developments in the region and led to much suffering. A sad example is when Colonel Muammar Gaddafi of Libya was assassinated during an attack by NATO forces. This caused much suffering among Libyans and retarded the country's economic development. Once the continent is united and well organized, the bad acts can be dealt with to pave way for peace and prosperity. Another sad example is the Democratic Republic of Congo, or the DRC, which sits on $25 trillion of natural resources, but is among the poorest countries in the world due to centuries of civil wars and conflicts. Foreign traders and mining companies in DR Congo are reported to be paying millions of bribes to politicians and other leaders rather than pay taxes. It is reported only 16% of the taxes is actually paid by those companies. The new generation of leaders. In recent past, we have seen bolder and independent-minded African heads of state. These leaders are demanding to be more in control of their own political, social, and economic affairs. African leaders have for long felt intimidated and/or overshadowed by their Western counterparts. Western powers have also been accused of imposing irrelevant policies in Africa, which aren't practical as per the design and culture of the continent. In recent past, we have noticed a number of bold statements from African heads of states, both verbally and in action.
We are not people to be belittled.
African countries have remained neutral in the Russia and Ukraine war. This wouldn't be the case sometime back, where African governments would be forced to take sides in exchange of promises from Western authorities. Also, the African continent has sent their own delegation to Ukraine and Russia to mediate peace talks led by President Cyril Ramaphosa of South Africa.
But Africa now is taking its own problems by its own hand.
Africa wants to be in control of their own research, formulations, and implementation of strategies, and so on.
The boards of directors of your multilateral institutions are not made up of independent directors. They are largely internal people or shareholders. We want to be key players on the world stage.
President Paul Kagame of Rwanda had this to say to a foreign journalist.
They are belittling Africans or leaders of Africa who are trying to...
Oh no, but the conversation about migration is a real conversation about human rights. So you believe that there are valid human rights concerns to be taken into account in this conversation?
Even in Europe.
And His Excellency, the President of the Republic of Uganda, has continuously educated the West on how to respect African leaders, culture, and the people.
Respect African societies and their values. If you don't agree, you just keep quiet. Let's manage our society the way we see. If we are wrong, we shall find out by ourselves. Just the way we don't interfere with yours.
How about this from H.E. William Ruto of Kenya?
Djibouti selling to Kenya or traders from Kenya selling to Djibouti have to look for US dollars. Development financing architecture, the global system is rigged against African progress.
This video is just a highlight of key developments in Africa. There are many more projects underway and in the pipeline. Majority are attached to AU's Agenda 2063. If you're an African out there, do not allow to be sucked into the hype and propaganda of turning against your fellow Africans. We are Africa, we are one, we are united, and together we can do more. Loudly and proudly, we can be the biggest and the strongest.
How about those of your country that actually committed crimes in my own country that you don't allow me to try?
You have done me a great service to watch this video until the end. Will you kindly click the like button, subscribe to this channel and comment.